to all. Today's daf is in Nedarim daf Ayin Aleph. We are starting at the top of the daf with a brand new Mishnah. And today's daf is sponsored Lili Nishmas, Mars Miriam Sarah, Bas Yaakov Maisha, her Neshama should have an Aliyah, and Lili Nishmas, Mars Freda Chayo Bela, Bas Yitzchak Tzvi, her Neshama should have an Aliyah. And the Mishnah says, Nadra Vihi Arusa. She made a neder and she was an Arusa, which means that both her father and her husband jointly have to be made for that neder. But then in his Garsha by Bayayim, she got divorced that day, the very same day she made the neder, in his Arsa by Bayayim, and then she got re-engaged to somebody else that same day. Afilu Lamea, even if she did this to 100 people, divorced Reuven, engaged to Shimon, divorced Shimon, engaged to Levi, Levi Yehuda, Yehuda Yisachar, Yisachar Zvulun, so on and so forth. Avia, her father, Ubaila Ha'achron, and her last husband, Mefir Nidareha, can and have to be jointly mefer that neder of hers. Remember why we're emphasizing this happened that day, because we only have one day to be made for a neder that she makes. And Za'aklal, this is the rule. Kol Shala Yatzal Rishos Atzma Shah Achas, as long as she hasn't gone to her Rishos at all, meaning she didn't become Bagaris or her father didn't die, Avia, Ubaila Ha'achron, Mefir Nidareha, her father and her last husband, they're made for her Nedarim. The Gemara asks, Minan da Aris Achron, made for Nedarim Sheniru Aris Rishon. How do we know that the last Aris is able to be made for Nedarim that were nearer to the first Aris? She was engaged to Reuven, she made a neder then, so Reuven technically is the one that needs to be made for it along with her father. How do we know that when she ends up with Binyamin, 11 people later, that he's able to be made for that neder that had shaykhs to Reuven? So Amar Shmuel answers Amar Krab, because the pasuk says, "Vim ish undareha aleha." If she gets engaged to a person, as we explained the pasuk previously, and her nedarim were on her. What do we learn from here? Nedarim shahayu aleh kvar, that her first husband is able to be made for nedarim that she brought with her into the engagement. So we see that a husband is able to be made for nedarim that she brings into the marriage. The Gemara asks, Del mahanimil shaloi nirul aros rishon. Maybe that's only referring to nedarim that never had to do with the first aros. This pasuk that we quoted is referring to the first aros, and when she got engaged to this first person, she brought some nedarim in with her. So maybe the pasuk is saying that first aros is able to be made for those nedarim. Of a nedarim shenir aros rishon, but nedarim that had shaykhs to that first aros because she made them after she accepted kiddushin from him. Lo matzi made for aros achron. Perhaps the last aros is not able to be made for those nedarim. So Gemara says, no, Aleha Kra Yiserahu. This pasuk of Aleha, Unidareha, Aleha, that's an extra pasuk. Why is that extra? Because the pasuk continues after that and says, Oimiv Tasvaseha Asher Asra al Nafsha. So the pasuk already uses a lashon which refers to her bringing Nedarim into the marriage with her. So we don't need to have this pasuk of Unidareha Aleha. So this pasuk is teaching us that even though she made a neder after she was already engaged to Reuven, and now she's engaged to somebody else, that somebody else is able to be made for that neder. And the Gemara tells us, Tani Kavasi to Shmuel, we have a brasa just like Shmuel. The brasa says, Nara Marasa Aviu Bailam Efirin Nedareha. A Nara Marasa, she's engaged, her father and her husband together are made for her nedarim. Ketzad, what's the case? So Shalavia Vahaferla, her father heard the neder and he was made for it. The husband didn't even have a chance to hear her neder, Ad Shemes, and then he died. And she got engaged that very same day. Even if she got engaged 100 times that day, could be her husband divorced her or he died 100 times in one day. Her father and her last husband, they're made for her nedarim together. But let's say it was the other way around. Shama Baila Vahaferla, her husband heard the neder and he was made for it. And her father didn't have a chance to hear the neder yet, and then her husband, who was already made for the neder, he died. And then she got engaged a second time. The father now goes and he's made for not only his own chelek, but also the chelek of the first husband that had died. The reason why he's made for that first husband's chelek is because even though the first husband was already made for it, once he died, that hafar that he did gets buried with him. It's not relevant anymore, so his half of the neder needs hafar again. And who does it go to? It goes to the father. Now here's the key. Amr of Nassim says, Hein hein divri Beishamai. This case that we just mentioned is Beishamai's opinion. Abel Beisil says, Ein yachal lahafer. The father is not able to be made for that neder on his own, and he has to do it with the second or last husband. Now, my kamifagi, what's machlekes over here? Ein alpha and Beis on top. Beishamai Savri Beishamai holds nedarim nami sheroy la'aris nisroik nereshus la'av. That even nedarim, which were roy to that first aris, once that first aris dies, that ability that he has to be made for those nedarim gets transferred to the father. Umega's guy is, and when that first aris was made for the neder, he was made for half of it, and therefore that means that the father's half is still remaining once the aris dies. So that half that he was made for gets transferred to the father, and the father now is made for the entire neder. However, Beis Hillel holds Avia u Baila Achrain Mefir Nedareha V'loy Megas Gayas, that her father and her last husband have to be made for the neder together. And we don't look at that first husband's hafara as if he was made for half of it and there's only half remaining. We now view the second or last husband that's involved as he's taking the place of the first one, and he, along with the father, have to be made for that neder together. So Beis Hillel's shita in this brisa is clearly a raya for Shmuel. And the Gemara continues with another question. Who they asked, Gerushin kishtika damya or kakama damya? Do we view divorce as if it's shtika, as if he's just being quiet, or like he's being mekimit? What's the situation? So his wife made a neder, and then he didn't say anything, and he just divorced her. Do we say that since he knows that after divorcing her, he's not going to be able to be made for the neder, so by him divorcing her, it's like him saying, I'm being making the neder, because now after I divorce you, no one's going to be able to be made for it? Or do we just view it as a shtika, as if he's not saying anything? The Gemara asks, my nafkamina, what's the practical nafkamina here? For example, Shenadar, where she made a neder, Vishama Baila, and her husband heard, Vigirsha, and he divorced her, Vahadra B'yayme, and then he remarried her that very same day that she made the neder. So if we're going to say that him divorcing her is just like being quiet, so Matzi Mefer law, he's still able to be made for that neder for her, because he remarried her on that same day, and it's considered like he was quiet and that he didn't say anything, so he still has the whole day to be made for it. However, if divorcing her is like being making the neder, so loy Matzi Mefer law, now that he remarried her, even though it was on the same day, he's still not able to be made for it for her, because it's like he was already making it. We're going to stop here for the day, pick up tomorrow at the top of the daf, attempting to bring answers to this question. For now, everyone should have a wonderful day.